And oh boy, that was really embarrassing. I had to have like the at school relationships, which would last like a week. And if I got lucky, I would get like one kiss, like, oh yeah, that was my holy grail, the relationships back then. Um, so I mean, that means that I didn't really grow up with friends outside of school, and until third grade, which my friend Jesse, who became my first best friend for a good 8 years, so 7 years, something like that. And but see, his grandmother who raised him was more liberal than my mother, and she would let him play like Halo and stuff like that, and hang out with kids around their apartment complex. Yeah, I was never allowed to do stuff like that, and I was questioning, which then she would bring it up to his grandmother, which would cause conflict and all this stupid stuff. And he later, at the age of 13, like he found this Bible verse that he didn't agree with. I forget what story it was, but it was like two angels came down to talk or whatever, and then he thought to himself back then that, hey, this doesn't make sense. And then my mom ostracized him and then forbid me to hang out with him because um, um, he went against God's word. He denounced, God's name, and that was oh man, apostate. That's terrible. And so there's that. Um, couldn't go to West Camp. Fifth grade, everybody gets to go to this camp thing for a week. I was never allowed to. I had to hang out, but at least I had Jesse. You know, even when it came to holidays, we're never allowed to celebrate holidays. And I remember like in second grade, like crying to my teacher, being like, I can't celebrate Valentine's Day because I'm a Jehovah Witness, stupid shit like that. And but at least I had Jesse. Like him and I had endured all that together. So that wasn't as bad at least. And then after everybody like had their party with like the cake and the soda and all the sugary shit, and then like after they all left, then we came in and ate it, which is fine I guess, but you can't do it during. Only after, I guess, after a certain amount of time, it's no longer considered demonic or whatever. Um, but at least I got to play guitar. And like my oldest brother, he played music with the neighbor's kid. He played guitar, which influenced Jimmy to play drums, which influenced me to play guitar, and then the bass, then harmonica, then accordion. So I'm very grateful for that at least. Um, yeah, I remember also too in religion, having to give talks, which I am grateful. That took me years to appreciate. At the theocratic ministry school, um, giving talks, being very nervous, and just belting this out, doing terrible jobs where everyone tells you, yeah, great job, and we really did horrible. How they do it is that when you give a talk, you're supposed to they give you this book on each chapter, you're supposed to work on certain keys, aspects and stuff. And then like after you give the talk, and then after the meeting's done, then the brother, will come up to you and say, what you did wrong, what you did right, what you should work on. In my mother's day, they used to do it right there in front of you, like right there in front of everybody, what you did wrong and what you did right, like super embarrassing. It was pretty bad. And also too, how I mentioned, the conventions, how it's just 3 days. I thought that was bad, but in my mother's day, which would be like the late '60s, um, those conventions would last a week. Oh, a week, day and night, day through night, and you know, work in the kitchen and stuff like that. And God, I mean, brutal. And obviously, it was a lot stricter back then. So they're definitely calming down now. Even now, it's like you go to meetings what two times a week, I think it is, and the hours are cut back a lot because the end is near. So to make things easier on people to instill that fear. And so there's that. Also, too, remember, um, this big thing that happened. One aspect that really got to me, oh, which was porn, because I really didn't get into that. Like I was like love girls. I remember I got my first kiss when I was 5 in daycare. I always loved girls. I always like wanted to be around them, and like kiss them and stuff like that. But it wasn't until 12 when I started like looking at porn. And I remember like when I did it the first time, I was like just like typing boobs, Google, and went through all like the weird links. I'm sure I got a million, spyware. And I remember like my brother came home just randomly, and then downstairs, I hear the door open, and then I just like fell on my knees, started praying. I'm like, oh God, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And then like I never did it again, but I kept doing it. The only way I got caught was because he put a key logger on. And my mother found out about it, and then I was crying, like, I feel like such a perv, I'm not gonna get in the new paradise, which is what Jehovah Witnesses believe. That's their heaven, is the new paradise, and the 144,000 will inherit the new, or no, 144,000 will go to heaven, and the rest will inherit the new paradise here on earth. And, but she goes on, you're just human, you're fine. And like when I was in seventh grade, my English teacher, she was very hippie, very liberal, and she had these ideas that she had this thing called valued employee, and it's pretty much like you had to prove yourself like you'd be a good student, which I was. I was an honor student, honor roll student. You had to be a good person outside of school as well. And the way you became a valued employee, which was you also not only had to get your other teachers to sign this piece of paper, but also to get your parents to sign it. And at that time, my mom divorced my stepdad, so it was just her, me, and Jimmy. And I couldn't because of this porn thing. And at that time too, I started studying with brothers. So this one brother I was studying with, she said, if you tell him that that you looked at it, then I will sign this piece of paper. I remember I was just crying my mind out. Oh my God, I did something terrible. I'm not worthy of God's, approval, and stuff like that. And which she pretty much, said it was alright, it was fine and stuff. And then she signed it, and then I got that plaque, which then I don't know, I forget exactly what that allows you to do. I remember you got like, cookies. I think that was the big thing. I guess it was just more of a self kind of thing, more like a realization that you are a good person, and that in church should make you feel great. And so did that. Um, Also too, like the going back to like the whole studying with brothers. Um, Even back then, like 13, because 13 I had like my invisible baptism. I would say in a way, because 13 I started to feel like a man, because that seemed to have like some significant meaning to it. The first numbers where I felt more mature were 10, because it was double digits. I felt more mature than, which 10 still is my favorite number. Not because anything like super significant happened then, but just because the simple fact that's when I felt more mature was 10. Then 13. So 13, I really started to pay attention in meetings this time. Didn't bring the remotes, anything like that. I started to really focus in. And when I was having these Bible studies, there was a few things that really threw me off. Even back then, I was curious, but never questioned until years later. Um, in the New World Translation, which is the translation of, for modern day, society, taken from King James, I think it's the Bible verse, John 1:1. Yes, because witnesses don't believe in the Trinity. So they rewrote that to make it say Jesus was a God, where in the King James Version it says Jesus was God. And I remember my Bible teacher pointing this out to me, and I said, I was thinking, you can't rewrite this. Even back then, that didn't feel right. I felt, no, it just said Jesus was God. Um, I don't know, but that didn't make any sense to me. Or how it talked about blood transfusions, how, because it says in Leviticus, yet it says, women's on our period, all these like ridiculous rules, in Leviticus. It seemed like cherry picking even back then, but I would never dare question.